Thanks so much, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. We're going to use this time to talk about actionable insights for medical affairs teams, some lessons from the front line. When we talk about medical affairs, I think just to level set from a perspective of what is it that medical affairs has to do? And the remit for medical affairs, global med affairs specifically, is extensive, right? It is across the product life cycle. It is with stakeholders, both internal and external, which is huge, expansive. And then the tactics that are being expected to deploy in that function are also quite impressive. If we, however, got it down to just a couple of key points, I think it's safe to say that the two big remits are knowledge transfer and insight generation. And if we think about those as remits, it's probably no surprise that medical affairs organizations around the world need a little bit of help. Medscape has been working with medical affairs organizations for 25 years. We've been a website for 25 years, and part of that is that we work closely to make sure that healthcare providers across the globe are kept up to speed and able to practice in the current standard of care. Currently, as of our 25th anniversary, which was 2020, so I guess we're 26 now, we have 5 million active physicians around the globe. And that source is a trusted source, and because of the size of that audience, is the number one trusted source for information and uh, cutting edge information and practice help around the world, according to DRG's Taking the Pulse. Now, we do keep track of that. In the last 5 years, that's been the case. We expect it to continue. And part of the value there is that we are experts in content design, content that's not just knowledge transfer, but then goes from knowledge transfer to behavior changes. And this last bullet point here is really, I think, what is also quite special about Medscape in the medical affairs space is we have relationships not only with the community physicians, those 5 million I just referred to, but we also have relationships with the thought leaders that drive a lot of the decisions and guidelines and things of that nature, because Medscape has always been for doctors by doctors. So when it comes down to it, those are the three sort of reasons why Medscape is partnered, and will continue to partner with medical affairs organizations. It's the brand integrity of Medscape and bringing that to the table, pedagogy, the science of learning, and then the rich amount of data that we have that we can share with medical affairs to help us get you there. When it's said and done, all those are kind of features. So what's the benefit? Speed of adoption, fast tracking advocacy, and providing actionable insights. So ultimately, that partnership is what we'd like to talk about. We do have a couple of categories of solutions that we work in, both analysis, internal training, and then pharma-initiated education. And so to that end, I'm picking a subset. The solution set here are for the pharma-initiated education pieces, things like master classes and therapeutic deep dives are an opportunity for pharma content to get put in front of clinicians and baseline learn and then ultimately apply over the course of 6 to 8 hours worth of content. Just think about an immersion course for clinicians, and whether that's a live or a virtual environment, that's what we're talking about. Rising Star Bootcamp is really, I think, very cool as an advocacy builder, working with clinicians to help them. Maybe they aren't KOLs yet, but they're about to be, or you'd like to see them become an advocate, and you'd like to see them become maybe your primary investigator. So learning some things there, like how to have a strong social cloud or footprint, is part of that story. Sketchpad animations and facilitated peer-to-peer are also tools that can be used. I think the research that we have of our members is that one of the things they're really, really missing right now in not having live conferences is the opportunity to have interactions with their peers. So peer-to-peer facilitated connection would allow that maybe your CMO to have a conversation about well, a number of things, right? Anything that would facilitate dialogue, or a study author or a primary investigator could have facilitated sessions, and not only just have it be a one-way, a monologue, but a two-way or around the horn, so that many could have conversations, not just with the, in this case, faculty, but also with themselves. So let me just give you a use case of one of these solutions so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. This particular use case is the masterclass, that first thing that I showed you on that list. It happened in Madrid in 2018. It was with European cardiologists, and it was a 2-day meeting. It also had 6 sessions, 33 individual talks, 32 internationally renowned cardiovascular faculty, 323 delegates, a turnkey experience for the client, and a lockstep partnership for over 9 months to make sure that that meeting just rocked it. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. This is the faculty that I just mentioned, and we are going to have an opportunity to talk with Jim Danuzzi, who is a chair of the event, here in just a few minutes, so that he can give you his perspective on things. Just what are we trying to do? You remember me saying knowledge transfer and insight generation, right? So knowledge transfer is the goal of the session, right? As far as the delegates are concerned. So we start with baseline knowledge, we get everyone on that same baseline, and then the next set of content, if you will, the next day, is about application. How do I apply what I have just learned? So setting a standard, and then application, and then ultimately they leave and you want to see adoption and practice. So that's the piece there. Now, let's look at some of the information to help us understand baseline knowledge. Now, remember, the topic is how do we get actionable insights from doing these things. So this is just a base knowledge question. Anyone can do this. That's all good and fine. But what if you wanted to know why someone answered yes or why they answered no to a thing? What if you wanted to look for patterns in those kinds of answers? The same would be, I'd ask you the same if it was a case study. What if someone who answered absolutely yes, or the group of people that answered absolutely yes or absolutely no, you wanted to understand some patterns about them? Maybe their pattern was geography. Maybe their pattern was MSLs. They had the same MSL point of contact. Those kinds of things would be incredibly helpful to shed light into actions that could be taken on your part with that. Another, would you do this tomorrow? So asking those kinds of application questions. The other kinds of things that are provided at the event, the event statistics are the slides that have the highest impact, meaning the slides that get the most action taken on them, slides with the most saves, slides with the most notes, the most the questions that each presenter is getting, and then the common questions for the entire day, or couple of days in this case. Now, I'm going to ask Jim to join us now and just talk a little bit about, the experience. I have 3 questions for Dr. Januzzi, and you see his bona fides here. Currently with Mass General, and was the faculty chair for this particular cardiovascular event. So, Jim, let me give these to you real quickly. So, first, maybe tell us a little bit about the Madrid masterclass that happened in late 2018. And then, in your opinion, what was the value to the delegates for attending that masterclass? And finally, if there was one thing that you'd suggest that we do differently, what would that be?
Yeah, Chris, thanks very much for the opportunity to answer your question. So first, let's start a bit about the Madrid Masterclass. This was a meeting that was held in late 2018, actually in late October, and was an international symposium focused on the role of biomarker testing in cardiovascular disease. It was a group of key opinion leaders as faculty with a large international audience, very interested in the subject. And I can tell you, I took away a lot from this meeting. It was really quite a remarkable experience with excellent topics. It was well moderated. and a wide range of very impactful, important topics were exchanged. With respect to your second question, the value to the delegates, well, I mean, really, when you think about the term master class, this really fits the definition. The faculty speaking at the meeting was a true all-star cast of individuals who were really at the top of their game in the various areas that they were asked to speak on. And so the audience was able to learn straight from the individuals doing the work, moving the needle forwards with respect to the role of biomarker testing in cardiovascular disease. That in and of itself was, I think, a really remarkable opportunity. But in addition, this meeting allowed for networking, individuals to meet each other and also meet the faculty. This leads to inevitably opportunities for further learning, further research, and other important benefits from an in-person meeting with an international cast of remarkably strong individuals. Lastly, if there was one thing I'd suggest, it sort of touches actually on my last answer, which is that while in-person meetings will inevitably come back after the COVID pandemic winds down, there is an obvious opportunity to add and expand a virtual option for these types of master classes. And so while I said that it was exceptionally beneficial for us to be face to face and have the faculty being able to interact with each other and with the audience in a very close manner, obviously many individuals who might be interested in attending but who could not attend would take the opportunity for a virtual option if it were available. Given the recent pandemic and the rise of virtual learning, it's reasonable to expect that after the pandemic winds down, virtual learning will be here to stay. And I think that adding that option to future master classes would be, I think, a tremendous boost and really add substantially to an already outstanding format. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I hope that answers all your questions.
Thanks, Jim. It does. And I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that you have to roll and won't be able to hang for some questions later, but those of you that may want to pose a question to Dr. Januzzi, I can certainly serve to get that there. So thanks again. What you're seeing here is our pivot now from knowledge generation as it related to that master class to insight generation. So this is sort of the behind the scenes things that can happen with a master class. In this case, you can run the delegates through our membership analysis that we have will allow us to look at the run-in period and see what kind of things are happening prior to the event. At the event, we just talked about some of those kind of statistics, and I'm going to show you in a moving forward way what a post-event or prospective analysis might look like. We're going to look at this first at the cohort and then at a participant level, so hold on there for that. Here you see these are the 323 delegates, and this tells you behaviors that and use patterns of them a year for the last year from the conference. So the conference took place in October. This is then through 2020. So it gives us a year and a quarter, really. So what we are looking at here is device use for both news, device use for content consumption on CME, as well as the learner cohort top 10 search terms. Now, what search usually does, at least if you're like me, you search for things you need to know more about. That in and of itself is a telling pattern for this particular cohort. Top news stories that this cohort was consuming, again, after the event, and specifically, what are the top 10 news articles that they consumed in this follow-up period of time. All can be helpful to understanding the effect after the event had occurred to a number of things, not to mention the fact that, at least in the United States, we are able to get a look at IQVIA data and bounce that off the cohort as well to see if there was any impact in prescribing, in diagnosing, in treating, and so forth. So that's all, I think, quite exciting opportunities. This is a dive into one of the learners. This is a learner who happened to be from Germany, and you can see things here. What's fascinating about this person's use pattern is that their device use is almost entirely a smartphone, which is not very common, but it does tell us something about that person, and might that also point to some resources that might need to be served in populations of the learner cohort who are just like Dr. Germany here. And then Dr. Germany's lead concepts consumed over the course of last year. So this level of data is what we're really talking about being able to do after an event, be it live or virtual. After Madrid happened, we all recognize this character here, right? This COVID-19 virus devil, and what it's done for all of our lives, certainly, not the least of which is what it did to really help help disrupt congresses throughout the world, right? And so every major congress that I'm aware of was canceled. And the question is, when will we resume in 2021? I know that ASCO, for instance, just announced that they were going to be entirely virtual in the summer again. So this is a pattern that we are seeing. And I think what's fascinating when you look at this, this is a 2x2 grid very quickly. It's the reach and the level of influence of the different channels that clinicians have in front of them. This is a DRG taking the pulse slide as well. You clearly want to be looking in this upper right quadrant where things like conferences and in person are the highest impact, and prior to COVID were happening the most often. As well as going to websites such as Medscape to consume that content. But of course, that is not happening with COVID. We actually conducted a survey to help us understand what was going to be the impact currently of COVID and then anticipated future impact. What you see here, this happens just to be the cut of data from 1,000 European-based physicians, and what they were telling us in this particular white paper, of which we can certainly make available to you. It's in public domain, but it is telling us a whole lot about what COVID did for them and in their lives, professional lives. This particular slide was the question was, what or how do you anticipate these changes to affect you going forward? And I think it's important, look, it's a little bit like childbirth in the sense that when you ask someone who's just had a child if they're going to have another child, the answer immediately is no, but give them 2 months or 3 months and they might change their mind. I think COVID might be this example too. But when this survey was conducted, which is in the very beginning of summer, clinicians who had attended conferences live, almost a quarter of them said, I don't ever anticipate going to live conferences again. So we got to deal with that. And how do we deal with that? That is the question in front of us. We also know, and that happens to be from IQVIA, the January data set, that medical affairs is not getting in the face time that they once were. In-person details are down to 34% versus the baseline. And while that is kind of surprising to me, I'm surprised it's so high, it is but a shadow of the past. So how are messages getting conveyed? How are we getting to impact the clinician's thoughts, mind share, and behaviors? I think the answer is virtual. It's virtual conferences. We at Medscape we do both live and virtual, or I should say we have the capabilities of doing live and virtual. But as of 2020 or March of 2020 forward, like most of us, everything went to virtual. And it's not being virtual. It's how do you make virtual compelling, and that is the challenge. We have a site that we are using for our conference homes, and what you're seeing is just a little bit of the structure, the aspects that we can plug and play with in order to get in front of it. But what you're seeing right here is that plugged and played, if you will, in a real world conference. And it just goes to show you, I mean, what you're trying to do in this case is you're trying to simulate the experiences that commonly base them in their own Congress experiences. We actually held like a similar conference. It's called NETS. It's a neuroendocrine tumor conference, and this was our 10th year of hosting this conference. This was the first year it was virtual, entirely virtual, and there were 259 delegates for this. It was bigger because it was virtual than it would have been had it been live. So virtuality expands the reach and the opportunity to connect. So what I guess I'll do now is move us over to questions and see what questions I might be able to answer for you.